Scenes from the Coffee Break French Café, Lesson 5. Bonjour Hélène, comment vas-tu?
Ça va super et toi Marc?
Très très bien, un tout petit peu fatigué aujourd'hui, mais je pense qu'un petit café m'aidera.
Super, une petite pause café alors.
Une petite pause café parce que, en fait, c'est Coffee Break. This is Coffee Break French and we are listening to scenes from the Coffee Break Café where we are eavesdropping, if you like, on scenes that happen in our café. Now, Hélène, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé dans le chapitre 4?
Alors dans le chapitre 4, il y a eu des nouveaux personnages. Jacques, le boucher charcutier.
Oui.
Et Dominique, le boulanger, qui sont très très amis tous les deux. Et ils ont l'air assez amusants aussi, c'est des comiques.
Oui, des larrons en foire, je pense. We learned that phrase last time, so thick as thieves, the two of them.
Ouais, elle est amusante cette phrase.
Ouais. And they were talking about the village sans âge.
Ouais, c'est ça, la fête annuelle du village. Mais ils n'avaient pas l'air très d'accord.
Non, tout à fait.
Et il y a aussi, je crois, une jeune femme, mais pour l'instant, on n'en sait pas beaucoup sur elle.
Yeah, a little bit mysterious, this young lady who was reading in the cafe. But perhaps we'll find out more about her this time or perhaps in a future episode.
On verra bien. Allez.
In this episode, however, we've got something a little bit different. In each episode, we just get a little bit of a scene of what's happening in the cafe, and we're going to find out exactly what that scene is now.
Scenes from the Coffee Break French Café. Chapitre 5. Pour une première soirée karaoké, le café était plein à craquer. Il y avait beaucoup de jeunes et quelques touristes étrangers qui ont chanté en anglais. Entre les barquettes de frites, qui se vendaient comme des petits pains, Fifi gardait un œil sur la liste des chanteurs pour s'assurer que ce n'étaient pas toujours les mêmes qui prenaient le micro. Même Jacques et Dominique ont fait un duo. Ils chantent comme des casseroles, mais ont bien fait rire tout le monde. Ils ont mis une sacrée ambiance et je suis maintenant persuadé que tout se passera bien pour Village sans âge dans quelques semaines, grâce à ces deux phénomènes. En fin de soirée, Ségolène nous a tous épatés quand elle a commencé à chanter. Tout le monde a dit qu'elle avait une voix magnifique. Elle nous a raconté que quand elle était jeune et qu'elle vivait à la Martinique, elle avait été chanteuse dans un groupe de jazz qui se produisait tous les week-ends. J'ai aussi été très surpris et hyper content de revoir deux copains musiciens avec qui j'avais monté un groupe de musique funk dans ma jeunesse et que je n'avais pas vu depuis des lustres. Bastien et Tanguy m'ont annoncé qu'ils allaient se paxer cet été et qu'ils voulaient réserver le café pour faire la fête avec leurs familles et amis respectifs. La nouvelle m'a tellement fait plaisir que j'ai sorti une bouteille de champagne pour marquer le coup.
très intéressant. J'aurais bien voulu faire partie de cette soirée.
Okay, let's go back through and we'll talk about all of the interesting language. So take it away, Hélène.
Pour une première soirée karaoké, le café était plein à craquer.
Love this expression. When you get somewhere where it's plein à craquer, it is full to bursting. It's full to the brim. So for our first soirée karaoke, our karaoke evening, le café était plein à craquer. The coffee was bursting to the brim.
Ouais. Et karaoké, c'est un mot japonais.
C'est ça?
Et ça veut dire orchestre vide.
Karaoke, oui, c'est ça. Et si vous voulez apprendre le japonais, nous avons maintenant Coffee Break Japanese. Donc, just look for Coffee Break Japanese and you'll be able to learn Japanese as well as French. Anyway, coming back to our text.
Il y avait beaucoup de jeunes et quelques touristes étrangers qui ont chanté en anglais.
So there were lots of young people, il y avait beaucoup de jeunes et quelques touristes étrangers and some foreign tourists qui ont chanté en anglais, who sang in English. Just a little reminder, beaucoup de jeunes. It's always beaucoup de when we're saying lots of. Don't make it des or anything like that. If we did say beaucoup des jeunes, we would be saying many of the young people, and we would go on to say were English, and they were singing in English because we've specified who these young people are. But because we're just talking about lots of young people, beaucoup de jeunes.
Yeah, for a general, lots of, beaucoup de.
Très bien.
And we've got étranger or étrangère, if it was feminine. And we also hear it in à l'étranger, abroad.
Abroad, à l'étranger, yeah. So, étranger, literally foreigner, but it also is the word for a stranger.
Yeah, that would both be the same translation, étranger in French.
Et c'est aussi le nom d'un roman très connu d'Albert Camus.
L'étranger.
L'étranger. Okay, let's continue.
Entre les barquettes de frites qui se vendaient comme des petits pains, Fifi gardait un œil sur la liste des chanteurs pour s'assurer que ce n'étaient pas toujours les mêmes qui prenaient le micro.
Okay, so we've got a nice idiom here. Qui se vendaient comme des petits pains. Let's go through the whole sentence first and then we'll pick up on that. Entre les barquettes de frites, so between the baskets of French fries.
Yeah.
Okay. Qui se vendaient comme des petits pains, which were selling literally like bread rolls, but I think in English we would say which were selling like hotcakes.
And we have the verb se vendre here, to sell itself. It's in the passive with the se. Because just vendre, to sell here, it wouldn't sound as good.
Yeah, because here it's like we're being sold almost, as you said in the passive voice, qui se vendait, which were selling or which were being sold comme des petits pains, like hotcakes. And Fifi gardait un œil, he was keeping an eye sur la liste des chanteurs, on the list of singers, pour s'assurer, in order to make sure que ce n'était pas toujours les mêmes, that it wasn't always the same ones qui prenaient le micro, who were taking the microphone. Any karaoke evening, it's always very important to make sure that it's not always the same person that's singing.
Yeah, everyone must have a chance.
Absolutely. Anything interesting in there?
We've got also a reflexive structure here with s'assurer que, to assure oneself of something.
Yep.
And ce n'était pas toujours les mêmes. We've got les mêmes, the same ones. And the les refers to the singers, les chanteurs.
Yeah, les mêmes. And if it were, we could have said les mêmes chanteurs or les mêmes personnes, for example. But we don't need to mention chanteur or personne because les mêmes, as you said, is a pronoun. It refers to those people. And in English, we can often say the same ones, or les bleus, the blue ones, les intéressants, the interesting ones, and so on.
Yeah. And also our pas toujours, that's not always. But if we turn that around, toujours pas, it would be still not. So it's different. So careful of the word order.
Tout à fait, tout à fait. Okay, so let's continue on and see who was singing.
Même Jacques et Dominique ont fait un duo.
Yeah, even Jacques and Dominique did a duet.
Yeah, I wish I heard that. Or maybe not. Ils chantent comme des casseroles, mais ont bien fait rire tout le monde.
I love this expression. Chanter comme des casseroles, or comme une casserole. It was when you sing like a pan.
Yeah, like a saucepan.
A saucepan, yeah. So you can imagine that's probably not very successful singing. So, ils chantent comme des casseroles, mais ont bien fait rire tout le monde. But they made everyone laugh. That's faire quelque chose. I love this expression because it's when you make something happen or when you make someone do something. Can you give us some other examples of this, Hélène?
J'ai fait danser mon meilleur ami.
So you made your best friend dance. Did your best friend want to dance?
Not so much.
Anything else?
Tu as fait tomber ton café.
Ah, good one. Yeah, you made your coffee fall. You spilt your coffee. We can also use it when we're talking about ourselves. For example, you can say, je me suis fait couper les cheveux. I had my hair cut. When you make someone else do the cutting of your hair. Je me suis fait couper les cheveux.
Yeah, usually when you go for self-care, when someone else did it for you, se faire.
Se faire. Faire. Okay.
And we've got the emphasis with bien also. That's a little word. I don't think you would really have a word for that in English in that sentence, but...
Yeah. I suppose we could say they really made everyone laugh or they made everyone laugh a lot. I think bien is a great word for kind of confirming things or for reinforcing things. C'est bien toi qui as chanté à la soirée karaoke. It was really you that sang at the karaoke. Oui, c'était bien moi. Yes, it really was me. Okay.
Alors, ils ont mis une sacrée ambiance et je suis maintenant persuadée que tout se passera bien pour Village sans âge dans quelques semaines grâce à ces deux phénomènes.
So, ils ont mis une sacrée ambiance. Sacré literally means sacred, but it's so often used when we want to just mean an amazing. So they made an amazing atmosphere. They created this amazing atmosphere. Et je suis maintenant persuadé, and I'm now convinced, persuaded, que tout se passera bien, that everything will go well pour Village sans âge, for the timeless village, dans quelques semaines, in a few weeks, grâce à ces deux phénomènes, thanks to these two phenomena, I think we would have to say in English.
So we've got mettre de l'ambiance, that's a nice expression. And we also have dans quelques semaines, so careful not to use en here. We need the dans for in a certain amount of time. En would be used for within a certain amount of time. Like for example, ils vont tout faire dans 5 jours. So in 5 days. Or ils vont tout faire en 5 jours. They'll do everything within 5 days.
Exactly. So let's imagine the situation. Perhaps we're having a new bathroom put in. Ils vont faire ça dans 5 jours. That means that in 5 days' time, they're going to begin. And when it's dans, we can also introduce the word time in English. That helps, I think. In 5 days' time, they're going to begin. But ils vont faire ça en 5 jours. They're going to do that within those 5 days. So perhaps they're starting in 5 days' time, but it's going to take them 5 days to do it. So it's careful because it's just that one small change between two words that both mean in, dans and en. But there's a very slight nuance there that can certainly make the difference as to when you're going to get your new bathroom.
Yeah. And we also have grâce à, thanks to, or it can also mean because of.
Yeah.
Grâce à has more of a positive connotation. If we wanted to be a bit more negative, we could use à cause de.
Yeah, exactly. So we only really see grâce à when it's a positive thing, thanks to. But as you said, if it's a negative thing, then you wouldn't say grâce à, you would say à cause de. Très bien. Okay, let's pause there and we'll come back with the rest of the chapter in just a moment. In each episode of the Scenes from the Coffee Break Café podcast, you'll enjoy listening to the story and our discussion of keywords and phrases from each chapter. But what if you could explore the language even further and take your learning to the next level? That's where the Scenes online course comes in. For every chapter, you'll get comprehensive lesson notes, a video version of the reading, exercises, vocabulary, and even spotlight videos that help break down the key expressions and grammar points with additional examples. It's the perfect way to deepen your understanding and get even more from the story. To access this wealth of learning resources, visit coffeebreaklanguages.com/scenes.
Et alors, on va continuer avec notre histoire.
Tout à fait.
En fin de soirée, Ségolène nous a tous épatés quand elle a commencé à chanter.
What a lovely word, épaté. What does it literally mean?
To impress.
Mm-hmm. So épaté, to impress, perhaps to astonish or to astound. I think the word gobsmacked always comes to mind when we say, elle nous a épatés. Ségolène nous a tous épatés. She completely impressed us all. She amazed us all quand elle a commencé à chanter, when she started to sing. Hélène, I've got a quick question for you here. There's an interesting pronunciation thing going on here that I think as advanced learners, as higher intermediate learners, we want to get right. And it's about the word quand. Can you read this sentence again for us and we'll listen carefully to quand?
Ségolène nous a tous épatés quand elle a commencé à chanter.
That's exactly it, because quand finishes with a D, but when it's followed by a vowel sound, so in this case elle or il or whatever other vowel it would be, we change the D sound, which would be silent normally, and we pronounce it as a T. So it sounds like quand, as if it's spelled Q-U-A-N-T. There is a word, quand, like quant à moi, as far as I'm concerned. But here we're looking at quand, the word for when, and it's followed by a vowel. So it's really important that you pronounce that with a T sound when you're saying quand elle a commencé, quand il a commencé, and so on. It's never quand elle a commencé. Really try to get that T sound to make you sound more French.
Yeah, and so careful then when you have to write it down that you don't write it with a T.
Tout à fait. Okay, so she completely blew us away when she started to sing, quand elle a commencé à chanter.
Ouais, elle a commencé à chanter. Here we've got commencer à plus an infinitive to start to. In English, you could also use with the gerund, but in French, we wouldn't do that.
Exactly. So we could say to start singing, but in French, in fact, I think I always move towards saying start to sing in English because I'm so kind of programmed into thinking about that. In French, you never say to start singing in French. It would always be to start to sing quand elle a commencé à chanter.
And we also had at the start en fin de soirée, and we've got soirée here in the feminine because we're more focusing on the duration of the evening rather than the moment of the day.
Which would be le soir as opposed to la soirée. Très bien, ok.
Tout le monde a dit qu'elle avait une voix magnifique.
So, no saucepans here. Everyone agreed. Tout le monde a dit qu'elle avait une voix magnifique, that she had a magnificent voice. A quick question. I said there qu'elle avait une voix magnifique. Does that sound odd to you? Should I said qu'elle avait une voix magnifique?
Non, je pense que tu peux prononcer les deux.
Les deux. Ok, ça va. Let's continue on.
Elle nous a raconté que quand elle était jeune et qu'elle vivait à la Martinique, elle avait été chanteuse dans un groupe de jazz qui se produisait tous les week-ends.
Okay, so we've got a little bit of backstory about Ségolène here. Elle nous a raconté that she told us that quand elle était jeune, is another quand elle était jeune, when she was young, et qu'elle vivait à la Martinique, and when she lived in Martinique, elle avait été chanteuse. She was a singer. She had been a singer, literally, in the pluperfect, dans un groupe de jazz, in a jazz group, qui se produisait tous les week-ends, who performed every weekend. There's quite a lot in here, Hélène, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. We have raconter, but we could also use the verb dire.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that raconter is more used to tell stories, to tell joke or recounting events.
Yeah. And the important thing here, particularly when we see it in this structure, is to remember that it's raconter à quelqu'un. And therefore, it's indirect. And that's why if you're looking at this, you might be thinking, where is the agreement on raconter? Because nous comes before. But that nous is not a direct object pronoun. It's an indirect object pronoun. That's why there's no S on the end of raconter.
Yeah. Quand elle était jeune, here était is imperfect because it describes an ongoing state in the past. And that's important for what comes next.
Yeah, okay. So when she was young. And then we've got this very odd que in here. What's going on here? Why is it not et quand elle vivait à la Martinique? Because in English, here we would say when she was young and when she lived in Martinique. Why don't we repeat the quand there?
The que here actually stands for a quand. It's just that we prefer not to repeat it again.
Okay, so to make it sound nicer, elle nous a raconté que, she told us that, quand elle était jeune, when she was young, et qu'elle vivait à la Martinique. And when she lived in Martinique, then we're going on to find out the rest of the information. Elle avait été chanteuse dans un groupe. She had been a singer in a jazz group qui se produisait tous les week-ends. That's interesting as well. Se produire, literally to produce itself.
Yeah, se produire would be to happen or to occur, but for musicians or actors or performers, just in general, it would be to perform.
To perform, yeah. They performed every weekend, tous les weekends. And don't forget that in weekend, we've got a hyphen, un trait d'union.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say also for à la Martinique, we use à with distant islands, usually. But for the French department of Guadeloupe and Martinique, we can also use en.
Ah,
So we could say qu'elle vivait en Martinique.
c'est intéressant. Ça, je ne savais pas. OK.
Elle avait été chanteuse. Also, we have the pluperfect because that happened while she was in Martinique.
Yeah. And it's before now, in a sense. OK. Good. Let's continue.
J'ai aussi été très surpris et hyper content de revoir deux copains musiciens avec qui j'avais monté un groupe de musique funk dans ma jeunesse et que je n'avais pas vu depuis des lustres.
So this is a very long sentence, and there's a lot going on in here, particularly with relative pronouns. Let's look at it, the whole sentence together. J'ai aussi été très surpris. I was also really surprised et hyper content and really happy, so happy, de revoir deux copains musiciens, to see again two musician friends avec qui j'avais monté un groupe de musique funk, with whom I set up a funk music group dans ma jeunesse, in my youth, et que je n'avais pas vu depuis des lustres, and whom I hadn't seen for ages, depuis des lustres. We'll come back to that. So, Hélène, there, we've got two relative pronouns, avec qui and que. Can you help us work out what's going on here?
So for or avec qui here, or qui refers to the narrator's friends. We could also actually here use lesquels.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. With whom, avec qui, avec lesquels. J'avais monté un groupe de musique, funk, we'll come back again to that. But next time, et que je n'avais pas vu. So there we've got que.
So que here, it refers to deux copains musiciens. That's a relative pronoun here.
Mm-hmm. So it's ultimately referring to the same people, but this time we don't need a preposition. We don't have with whom, but que je n'avais pas vu. Because we've got the que here, that is going to necessitate our past participle to agree. The vu there takes an S on the end because we're referring back to those deux copains musiciens.
Yeah, it stands as our preceding direct object.
Tout à fait. So, monter.
Monter, that has different meanings. Can mean to build, to climb.
Mm-hmm.
But here it's more like to start or to set up.
Yeah, to set up. And it's another one of these interesting verbs that changes its auxiliary verb depending on its meaning. So, monter, in this sense, j'ai monté or j'avais monté, it's taking avoir. But can you give us an example, Hélène, of where we would see monter with être?
Je suis montée en haut des escaliers.
Yeah, so I went up to the top of the stairs. Or je suis monté dans le train. I got up onto the train. I stepped onto the train. I embarked on the train. There, the only person we're moving is ourselves. And in that case, we're using être. But whenever we're monting something else, when we're setting something up, then that's when we would take avoir.
Yeah. And if we're using it with être, it can just stand on its own. Je suis montée.
Tout à fait.
But with avoir, we need an object after that.
Exactly. It's that whole difference between a transitive verb, where there is something that is having something done to it, in this case, a group, or lifting a box, or taking out those chairs and tables in our last episode, or an intransitive verb, where there is no object.
Ouais. Y a un autre mot aussi intéressant dans cette phrase, c'est hyper.
Hyper.
Ça, c'est beaucoup utilisé, surtout en langage parlé, je trouve,
Oui.
devant les adjectifs, pour donner plus d'importance.
And we would use hyper in English, but in very specific circumstances. But it's really, really common in French to say hyper cool, hyper content, and so on.
Yeah.
The one other thing I wanted to pick up here is that lovely phrase, depuis des lustres.
Oh.
Tell us about that.
Ouais, j'avais oublié ce mot. Les lustres, that's chandeliers.
Mm-hmm. So literally, since the chandelier, so it means for a long, long time, depuis des lustres. So if Nico hadn't seen these two people for ages, he is going to find out some news about them.
Bastien et Tanguy m'ont annoncé qu'ils allaient se paxer cet été et qu'ils voulaient réserver le café pour faire la fête avec leur famille et leurs amis respectifs.
Une bonne nouvelle alors. Bastien et Tanguy, the two friends, m'ont annoncé, they told me, qu'ils allaient se paxer, that they were going to form a civil partnership. It's paxer, can you explain paxer?
Ouais, paxer, ça vient du pax, ça veut dire pacte civil de solidarité.
Okay.
And that's something that people can do if they don't want to get married. So they're basically declaring that they're living together.
Yeah.
It's not as much paperwork as a wedding, and if you want to stop it or break it,
Okay.
it's just another paper to sign. So yeah, and you can just do that at the mairie,
Mm-hmm.
the town hall.
Okay. Nice news nonetheless. So Bastien et Tanguy are having their civil partnership cet été, this summer, et qu'ils voulaient réserver le café, and they wanted to book the café pour faire la fête in order to have a party avec leur famille et amis respectifs, to have a party with their families and friends, with their respective families and friends.
Donc, ils m'ont annoncé, here the M apostrophe, that's an indirect object because it's annoncer quelque chose à quelqu'un.
C'est cela, c'est cela.
And cet été, and été is masculine noun, so we've got cet, C-E-T. With something feminine is C-E-T-T-E, cet.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one because set, when it's combined with été, it sounds as if it's been written as C-E-T-T-E, but it's that version that's used specifically for before a vowel for masculine words. So C-E-T, before a vowel, cet animal, for example, this animal is masculine, but C-E-T there for the masculine. Otherwise, it would be ce livre, and so on.
Et qu'ils voulaient réserver le café, so the que here, it links to ils m'ont annoncé. So ils m'ont annoncé que, and first thing it was ils allaient se paxer, and the second thing is ils voulaient réserver le café.
Exactement.
La nouvelle m'a tellement fait plaisir que j'ai sorti une bouteille de champagne pour marquer le coup.
Okay, so la nouvelle, the piece of news, m'a tellement fait plaisir. It gave me such pleasure que j'ai sorti une bouteille de champagne, that I took out a bottle of champagne pour marquer le coup, in order to mark the occasion.
Yeah, and m'a tellement fait plaisir, it's faire plaisir à quelqu'un. So again, with the a, it means that our m is indirect object.
Yeah. And that's something that we see time and time again. We've seen lots of examples of this. And we are reinforcing it because I think it's really useful to see in each case, okay, is that a direct or is it an indirect? Because we can always work that out when it's, in this case, for example, annoncer quelque chose à quelqu'un, raconter quelque chose à quelqu'un. And if it's the à quelqu'un part that we're replacing, that's where it's going to be an indirect object pronoun.
Yeah. It's very useful to know if it's direct or indirect when we need to have a perfect tense. Do we need to add an E or an S at our past participle?
Tout à fait, tout à fait. Okay, it's time now to listen to the full text one more time, and hopefully now that we've gone through everything, you'll be picking up all of these interesting aspects. And also, every time you hear a que plus a perfect tense, see if you can work out whether there is indeed an agreement on the past participle or not, based on whether it's indirect or a direct construction.
Scenes from the Coffee Break French Café. Chapitre 5. Pour une première soirée karaoké, le café était plein à craquer. Il y avait beaucoup de jeunes et quelques touristes étrangers qui ont chanté en anglais. Entre les barquettes de frites, qui se vendaient comme des petits pains, Fifi gardait un œil sur la liste des chanteurs pour s'assurer que ce n'étaient pas toujours les mêmes qui prenaient le micro. Même Jacques et Dominique ont fait un duo. Ils chantent comme des casseroles, mais ont bien fait rire tout le monde. Ils ont mis une sacrée ambiance et je suis maintenant persuadé que tout se passera bien pour Village sans âge dans quelques semaines, grâce à ces deux phénomènes. En fin de soirée, Ségolène nous a tous épatés quand elle a commencé à chanter. Tout le monde a dit qu'elle avait une voix magnifique. Elle nous a raconté que quand elle était jeune et qu'elle vivait à la Martinique, elle avait été chanteuse dans un groupe de jazz qui se produisait tous les week-ends. J'ai aussi été très surpris et hyper content de revoir deux copains musiciens avec qui j'avais monté un groupe de musique funk dans ma jeunesse et que je n'avais pas vu depuis des lustres. Bastien et Tanguy m'ont annoncé qu'ils allaient se paxer cet été et qu'ils voulaient réserver le café pour faire la fête avec leurs familles et amis respectifs. La nouvelle m'a tellement fait plaisir que j'ai sorti une bouteille de champagne pour marquer le coup.
Ça y est, c'est notre 5e chapitre. We're halfway through this part of Scenes from the Coffee Break Café. We hope you're enjoying it so far. Of course, if you're using our course version, then you can move on to our exercises, the vocabulary list, and also those additional videos, the spotlight videos, where we're helping you take some of the interesting language and take it further. You can find out all about that if you're not yet using it at coffeebreaklanguages.com/scenes.
And if that's not enough French for you, you can sign up for a free newsletter where we'll give you some tricks, tips to help you build a bit more your language skills. So to access this, you just have to go to coffeebreakfrench.com and sign up there.
Merci Hélène, comme d'habitude.
Merci Marc, à bientôt.
Et merci à vous, au revoir. You have been listening to a Coffee Break Languages production for the Radiolingua Network. Copyright 2025 Radiolingua Limited. Recording copyright 2025 Radiolingua Limited. All rights reserved.